But they stared, each gaze louder than words, each smirk a verdict. The air inside the Beverly Crest Auto Gallery shimmered with moneyed arrogance and the faint musk of leather interiors. Polished marble floors reflected patent dress shoes. Cufflinks sparkled like judgment. And in the middle of it all, grease-stained boots disrupted the gleam. A woman stood at the service bay entrance, mid-20s, black, slender. Her overalls bore the ghosts of old oil spills and faded patches that spelled out Johnson Auto Repair. Her hair was pulled into a tight bun. Her posture, still as stone, unmoved by laughter. Kendra Lewis said nothing. Her eyes were fixed on the lime-green Lamborghini Huracan idling under showroom lights. The engine coughed, a wet electronic sputter that did not belong in a $300,000 machine. Kendra winced, subtly. No one noticed. Or if they did, they mistook it for awe. A white man in a bespoke navy suit rolled up his sleeves like it was theater. He was tall, mid-30s, with two bright teeth and the impatience of inherited wealth. His name, worn proudly on his wrist in the form of a custom-engraved Rolex, was Blake Renshaw. "You know what?" Blake declared, loud enough for his voice to bounce off the glass walls. "Let's make this fun." Kendra did not move, not when the crowd circled, not when the mechanics backed away, not when Blake pointed. 100 grand, he said, finger now aimed at her like a command. "Right here, in cash. If you can get this thing running." A ripple moved through the room. Champagne glasses stilled. Phones rose to record. Someone chuckled. The valet coughed, then pretended he had not. "And when you fail," Blake continued, "you say it. Loud enough for every camera here to hear. Say women do not belong in a garage. Say you were playing dress-up." A pause. Kendra blinked once, twice. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, controlled. "Do I get to open the hood?" More laughter. Blake mimicked applause. "She talks!" Someone from the crowd muttered, "She'll be crying in 10 minutes. Another whispered, "Is this even legal?" The dealership manager, visibly sweating, stepped back into the shadows. The place no longer felt like a showroom. It felt like an arena. Kendra approached the car. The men parted reluctantly, as though proximity might stain their suits. She placed one hand on the hood, palm flat. A faint tremor pulsed beneath the aluminum. She listened. Click. Hiss. Hesitation in the fuel relay. Inconsistent spark timing. Smelled like a burned sensor. Definitely not just an injector issue. She turned to Blake. "Someone installed an aftermarket chip," she said, her tone clinical. "It is disrupting the throttle map and fuel sync." Blake laughed, too loud. "Sweetheart, that is a factory-tuned engine." "No," Kendra replied. "It was. 3 months ago." Silence. Not complete. Just enough for her words to spread like smoke. Blake scoffed. "You making excuses already?" "I am asking for tools," she said. "And space." More stares. More murmurs. "You really think you are the first person to try?" Blake asked, walking a slow circle around her like a predator too amused to pounce. 4 certified mechanics gave up. One of them trained in Bologna. That engine has been a mystery for weeks. "It is not a mystery," Kendra said softly. "It is a lie." The sentence did not shout. It landed. The lie, of course, was not mechanical. It was social, cultural, institutional. The lie that women, black women especially, did not belong near torque wrenches or V10 engines. The lie that competence came dressed in a tie. "I will need a diagnostic scanner," Kendra continued. "The dealership one is outdated, and a reflash kit, and 2 hours." Blake's eyes narrowed. "You do not get to change the rules." "I am not," she said. "I am accepting your challenge. On record." She turned toward the growing crowd. "My name is Kendra Lewis. I own and operate Lewis Performance Garage, and I am here to fix what none of you could. Gasps. One of the showroom interns glanced at a tablet, typing fast. Wait, he whispered. Her name's on an SAE white paper about torque curve manipulation. Impossible, someone replied. But doubt had entered the room, quietly, just like she had. Blake's jaw tensed. Fine, he said. Call your people. Bring your toys. But remember the deal. When you fail, I will not, she said. No smile, no bravado, just certainty, the kind that made liars nervous. She stepped away, pulling out her phone. Blake walked back to his entourage, laughing again, louder now, a bit forced. She's got guts, I'll give her that. One of his friends leaned in. What if she actually— She won't, Blake snapped. She cannot. But in the far corner, a valet whispered into his phone. You better get here fast. Something's happening. No, I do not know her name, but she's about to make history. And at the edge of the room, someone stopped recording and started watching. The scanner van pulled in without fanfare. It was matte black, unbranded, and silent except for the soft grind of high-performance brakes. For a moment, it looked like a service vehicle that had taken a wrong turn, until the side door slid open and a man in a gray jumpsuit stepped out, carrying a case that gleamed like brushed steel. He moved with purpose. Authority. The crowd quieted, uncertain. Blake Renshaw straightened his blazer and stepped forward, already shifting into the practiced charm of someone who knew how to manipulate optics. And who are you supposed to be? He asked, gesturing with a sweeping grin. The man did not answer him. Instead, he turned to Kendra and nodded. Tools, as requested. His voice was calm, neutral, but it cut through the air like precision machinery. Kendra took the case. Appreciate it, Paul. Blake's grin faltered. You two know each other? Kendra did not look up. Paul Frazier, Senior Systems Engineer, North American Division, Class A certification, Lamborghini internal diagnostics and calibration. Blake blinked. Paul opened a second case and laid out a series of instruments that looked nothing like the greasy wrenches the onlookers expected. This was surgical, laser-guided, diagnostic cables like tendrils, processors running proprietary Italian firmware, an ECU harness designed for performance recalibration at the microsecond level. What is all this? Blake asked, voice tightening. Standard tools, Paul replied, for someone who knows what they are doing. That stung. Laughter did not follow this time, not openly. Kendra had already popped the hood. The engine bay, once an enigma wrapped in carbon fiber, now opened before her like a confession. She slid on nitrile gloves and pressed her fingers gently against the intake manifold. Feel that? She murmured to Paul, though her voice was meant for anyone listening. He leaned in. Hotter than it should be, even at rest. Faulty mapping, she confirmed, and mismatched voltages on the coil circuit. Paul connected a reader. The screen flickered. Unauthorized chip. Generic module. Overwritten throttle values. Someone tampered with the torque tables, Paul said quietly. Badly. Blake tried to wave it off. That could have been from before I bought it. You bought this car new, Paul replied without looking at him. Factory logs say no mods were approved. These were added post-purchase. Kendra tapped the scanner. See that symbol? She asked, pointing to a faint watermark embedded in the chip's code signature. It belongs to Apex Dynamics, a third-party shop banned from warranty-backed upgrades after they were caught using counterfeit components. Counterfeit? Blake repeated, his voice cracking around the edges. That is dangerous, Kendra interrupted. These chips reroute timing curves to simulate performance boosts, but they also destabilize ignition sync and fuel distribution, which is why your car has not run in weeks. Someone in the crowd swore under their breath. Another stepped forward. I think I bought an upgrade kit from Apex a few months ago. Blake turned pale. Kendra remained focused. Her hands worked in silence, removing the faulty module, reconnecting original sensor links, and prepping the ECU for reprogramming. Paul kept his voice low. "You sure you want to keep going?" "I came to pick up a part," she replied. "They turned it into a circus. I am just making sure the lights go out when the show ends." Paul smiled faintly. "Still surgical with the blade?" She glanced at him, eyes sharp. "Surgical gets you fired when you are not the face they want." Another silence, one with weight. Paul adjusted the calibration tool. "Logging the fix?" Kendra nodded. "And the source of the problem." The scanner began recording. Not just readings, but timestamps, modification logs, ECU access traces. Each line of code was a footprint, and Kendra was following the trail. "Whoever installed this," Paul muttered, "wanted it to fail." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Across the room, Blake's hands curled at his sides. His voice, when it came, was brittle. "This has nothing to do with the bet. You said you could fix it." "Not investigate me." "I said I could fix the car," Kendra replied. "And I am." Her fingers danced across the tablet. She entered final commands and glanced at Paul. "Ready?" He nodded. "System clean. No alerts." Kendra stepped back, removed her gloves, and placed them beside the case. The keys lay waiting on a velvet pad, untouched since the morning. She picked them up. A breathless hush settled over the crowd. She slid into the driver's seat, adjusted the mirrors, not because she needed to, but because it reminded her of every man who had underestimated her behind the wheel. Then, with deliberate calm, she turned the ignition. The Lamborghini roared to life. Not a sputter, not a cough. A clean, high-performance growl that echoed off the showroom's vaulted ceiling. A perfect symphony of timing, pressure, and power. Mechanical truth in motion. Kendra stepped out, leaving the engine humming behind her. "I believe," she said quietly. "That concludes our demonstration." Blake said nothing. His audience was gone. They were not laughing anymore. They were recording, documenting, remembering. And for the first time, they were not looking at her like a joke. They were looking at her like a storm they had never seen coming. The applause did not come. Not yet. Instead, the room was held hostage by silence, the kind that follows revelation, not the kind that waits for permission to cheer. Kendra Lewis stood beside the idling Lamborghini, arms at her sides, oil-stained gloves hanging from her pocket like war medals. Her posture was unthreatening, but immovable, like steel cooled in silence. Across from her, Blake Renshaw looked small, smaller than his suit, smaller than his watch, even smaller than his arrogance. Sweat beaded along his temple. His lips moved, but no sound followed, like a man trying to remember the script in a play that was no longer about him. "Who did the last install on that car?" Paul Fraser asked, not unkindly, but with the precision of a man trained to gather facts. Blake blinked. I do not recall." Kendra stepped forward. Not aggressive, just enough. "You told me earlier it had been to 4 mechanics," she said. "You did not mention a shop name, or a certification." Blake shrugged, palms up. "It was one of those high-end tuning places. They all know each other. I do not remember." Paul raised an eyebrow, then tapped a few buttons on his tablet. "Strange. This vehicle has no service records outside of initial factory inspection, no reported upgrades, no warranty notifications." "That doesn't mean anything," Blake snapped, trying to recover his stance. "Plenty of shops do clean work off the books." "It is not clean," Kendra said, "and it was not off the books. It was concealed." She handed Paul the counterfeit chip. "It is marked," she continued. "Serial embedded. Cross-reference it." Paul pulled a portable reader from his case, inserted the chip, and watched as a set of numbers populated the screen. His jaw tightened. Registered sale. 3 months ago. Apex Dynamics. Distributed under a private client tag. He paused, then frowned. And the billing address is the same as the vehicle registration. A beat passed. Someone whispered, "Wait, you installed it?" Blake opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "That's not... I had someone else do it. I didn't install anything myself." "But the chip was registered under your name," Paul said, tone still calm, still official. "And your vehicle. That makes you accountable." Murmurs swelled, heads turned, phones stayed up. This was no longer a car repair. This was discovery, testimony, trial. "You did this to yourself?" asked one of the onlookers, a man in loafers and a linen blazer who had placed a bet against Kendra earlier. "You rigged your own car to fail?" "No," Blake said sharply. I was testing different performance options. It was research. It was sabotage," Kendra said. The word landed like a verdict. "You needed it to fail," she continued. "You set up a scene, picked someone easy to discredit, built a stage." She looked around at the crowd. "And you invited everyone to watch me collapse." The silence that followed was no longer stunned. It was ashamed. The dealership manager stepped forward from the edge of the room, his face pale. "Miss Lewis," he said, voice tight with unease, "I was not aware of any of this. We were told this was a legitimate challenge. Mr. Renshaw presented it as a diagnostic test." "Did you agree to have it filmed?" she asked. He hesitated. "Not officially. Blake said it was for personal content, branded promo, client-side experiment." She nodded. "Then you will not mind if we film the conclusion." Paul, without waiting for permission, raised his phone and began recording. "Kendra," he said, his tone now carrying formal weight, "please confirm your credentials for the record." "Kendra Lewis, owner and lead technician at Lewis Performance Garage, certified by the National Automotive Service Association, former consultant on torque calibration systems for Bavaritech Motors, currently on contract with 2 manufacturers for ECU optimization research." Paul lowered the phone slightly. "Thank you." Blake shifted in place. "This is ridiculous. You think people are going to believe—" "They already do," said a voice from the back. It was the valet. He stepped into the circle of light cast by the running car, held up his phone. The screen showed a live stream. Thousands of viewers. "You're trending," the valet said flatly. Blake turned to the dealership manager. "You're going to let this happen? She's hijacking your space." The manager exhaled slowly. "No, Blake," he said. "You hijacked it. She just gave us back the truth." Blake looked around, searching for a friendly face, but the crowd had changed. Where there had once been smugness, there was reflection. Where there had been mockery, there was weight. Kendra stepped back, removed the key from the ignition, and handed it to Paul. "For the record," she said, "the car is fully operational. I corrected all interference, removed unauthorized components, and restored factory settings." Paul nodded and turned to the dealership staff. "Log the full report," he said. "Include the tampering and the serial match. We will be forwarding this to the manufacturer's legal department." Blake tried one last time. "You cannot do that. This was just a test. A joke." "No," Kendra said, finally facing him. "It was a pattern, and I am done being part of it." She stepped past him without flinching. The crowd parted like water. Paul followed her out, toolbox in hand, the van waiting just beyond the glass. Inside, the engine purred. But the noise that mattered now was the quiet behind her, the kind that meant they were finally listening. Outside, The California sun glared off polished chrome and dealership glass, but the air felt different now, thicker, heavier. A kind of quiet reckoning hovered over the lot, as if the luxury cars parked in perfect rows no longer sparkled with the same promise. Inside, the crowd had thinned. A few lingered, whispering. Others slipped away quietly, their laughter long gone. Kendra Lewis leaned against the side of the scanner van, her arms crossed over her chest. Her gloves were gone. Her overalls still bore the black fingerprints of the engine she had just restored, but her expression was clean, calm, like something inside her had reset. Paul Frazier stood beside her, tablet in hand, reviewing the data one last time. He did not speak. He did not need to. "I knew he was hiding something," Kendra said softly, her eyes fixed on the clouds gathering along the horizon. "But I thought it would just be a lie. I did not expect a whole scheme." Paul glanced over. "You expected too little of him." "I expected too much of the others," she replied. Paul gave a quiet nod, the kind that acknowledged more than it said. Across the lot, Blake Renshaw remained near the Huracan, now surrounded by dealership staff, no longer admirers, but auditors. The manager was speaking to him in a clipped tone, one hand holding a phone, the other pointing at the counterfeited chip still sealed in a plastic evidence bag. Blake's posture was unraveling. His hands moved faster than his words. His voice climbed, but no one moved closer to support him. Not this time. Kendra turned toward the van, opened the rear doors, and began packing the tools back into their cases. Methodical, clean, like erasing footprints from a battlefield. "You could sue him," Paul said, watching her work. "For what?" she replied without looking up. "Defamation? Discrimination? Public humiliation? All of it." She clicked the final case shut. "I do not need a courtroom to prove I belonged," she said. "The engine already did that." Paul smiled faintly. "Then what comes next?" Kendra closed the van doors. "I go home, finish my work week, balance invoices, rotate tires, same as always." She paused. Her gaze drifted back toward the showroom. "Only now," she added, "they will remember my name." Inside, the dynamic had changed. What was once performance art for the elite had become a procedural cleanup. Blake's friends had all vanished. The energy had gone flat. No champagne, no mocking grins, no bets. Just uncomfortable silence and the tapping of keys on official tablets. The dealership manager stepped outside, his tie loosened, brow glistening with sweat. "Miss Lewis?" he called out. Kendra looked over. I just wanted to say, we had no idea." She waited. His mouth opened again, then closed. It was not a defense. Just the absence of one. "We would like to make it right," he added, uncertain. "Maybe offer you a consulting position. Or a public statement, maybe." Kendra tilted her head slightly. "A statement?" He nodded eagerly. "Yes. Something about how you handled the situation with grace. About how we value diversity in the industry." Paul suppressed a smirk. Kendra took a step forward, her boots crunching gravel as she closed the distance. "Let me ask you something," she said. "If I had not fixed that car, what would your statement have said then?" The manager froze. "I understand," he mumbled. I wanted to show respect." "Then show it," she said evenly. "In how you hire, in how you train, in who gets to speak in the room before the engine starts." He nodded, eyes downcast. "Yes, of course." She turned away. The conversation was finished. Paul climbed into the passenger seat as Kendra slid behind the wheel. The van was still humming. Quiet, efficient, practical. The opposite of the cars behind them. The opposite of the noise that had filled the day. "You still have your invoice from earlier?" Paul asked as she started the ignition. Kendra reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a folded paper. "I was just picking up a brake rotor," she said, smiling now. "That is what I came for." Paul laughed. "This is going to be one hell of a footnote on a parts receipt." They pulled out of the dealership, past the entrance still dotted with expensive shoes and stunned expressions. The Lamborghini stayed behind, idling like a tamed beast. But something else had changed. For the first time in hours, someone opened the glass doors for her. Not out of pity, not out of apology, out of acknowledgement. And in that small gesture, unspoken, unasked for, was the beginning of something new. Kendra did not look back. The road ahead was wide, clear, earned. The video surfaced within hours. A shaky live stream, recorded vertically on a valet's phone, opened with Kendra Lewis wiping her hands on a shop towel, framed by the hulking silhouette of the Lamborghini and the blinking diagnostic screen. Her voice was clear, steady, her tone calm. No anger, no gloating. "The car is fully operational. I corrected all interference, removed unauthorized components, and restored factory settings." That was it. That one sentence. Clipped. Professional. Undeniable. By midnight, the clip had surpassed 500,000 views. By morning, it had a name. The Woman Who Outran a Lie. The headlines came next. Some focused on the car, others focused on the wager. But the stories that gained traction were the ones that focused on her. Not just what she did, but what she stood for. What she revealed. Mechanic outsmarts billionaire's bet. Engineer exposes high-end fraud. Black woman's silence dismantles sexist spectacle. And beneath those headlines, the comment sections burned with conversation. Heated, divided, but undeniable. Kendra Lewis had entered the national consciousness without asking for it. She sat at her kitchen table 3 days later, sipping lukewarm coffee, scrolling through an inbox she had not opened since the video went viral. There were interview requests, podcast invites, 3 automotive blogs asking for guest posts. A magazine offered a photo shoot. A university wanted her to keynote their Women in STEM conference. She scrolled past all of them. Her thumb paused only at one message, from an unfamiliar name. Gina Alvarez, Senior Director, Axiom Motors. "We saw what happened at the Beverly Crest dealership. We'd like to talk. No PR, just substance. I think there's a place for you here." Kendra read it twice, then flagged it and closed the laptop. Outside, her small garage buzzed with familiar life. A Dodge Charger sat lifted on the rack, oil pan still draining. The muffled sound of jazz filtered through the cracked door. The air smelled like brake cleaner and metal, a smell most people hated, but to Kendra, it was home. Paul was already there, sleeves rolled up, tuning a diagnostic gun. "You see the video hit 1 million this morning?" he asked without looking up. Kendra nodded, tying her hair back. "It's not the video that matters. It's what it shook loose." Paul turned to face her. "There's chatter about the counterfeit parts. Blake's name came up in a regional audit. Dealership chains are pulling all Apex Dynamics products from their shelves." "Good," she said simply. He hesitated. "You going to respond to the job offers?" "I am thinking about it." "Thinking's a good place to start," he said, his smile crooked. "Better than hiding." Kendra walked over to the Charger and peered into the undercarriage. Her fingers traced the axle like reading Braille. Her mind drifted. Not to the money. Not to the applause. But to the moment the engine turned over, when the sound silenced the men who thought her silence meant weakness. That moment had done something irreversible. Not to the car, to her. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Apex Legal Services. "A formal inquiry has been opened regarding client-sourced performance modules under your vehicle diagnostics. We may request a sworn statement regarding your findings at Beverly Crest." She handed the phone to Paul. He read it, whistled low. They're scared, he said. They know the chip came from someone high up. You uncovered more than a broken engine. I did not go looking for that, she replied. No, but it found you anyway. Kendra wiped her hands and looked at the wall where her grandfather's photo still hung. In it, he stood beside a rusted Mustang with his sleeves rolled up, grease on his face, and a grin full of pride. She walked over and tapped the frame once. I remember when I was 14, she said softly. A customer told him I would ruin his car just by looking at it. Grandpa never raised his voice. He just said, engines do not care what hands fix them, only that they do not get lied to. Paul crossed his arms. Blake Renshaw lied to the wrong one. She nodded, then picked up a wrench. Let's finish the charger, she said. The moment of glory had passed. The internet would move on. The headlines would fade. But the truth remained. Quiet, permanent, undeniable. In a world obsessed with who speaks loudest, Kendra had proved that competence does not need to shout. It just needs to be heard once, clearly, by everyone. The courtroom was quiet, but not the kind of quiet that soothes. It was the sharp, sterile kind, the kind that presses against your skin, the kind made of judgment. Kendra Lewis sat alone at the witness table, posture straight, face calm. She wore a navy blazer over a dark gray blouse. No oil stains, no gloves, just precision, just control. Across the room, behind the defense bench, Blake Renshaw sat with his attorney. He looked thinner, hollowed. His signature smirk was gone. The silk tie around his neck was loose, as if even his confidence had come undone. The emblem behind the judge read, United States District Court, flanked by a flag and a seal. The walls smelled faintly of polished wood and old ink. Above, the lighting buzzed in a soft, monotonous hum, constant, like the ticking of consequences. The court clerk spoke. Please state your name for the record. Kendra's voice never wavered. Kendra Elise Lewis. Occupation? Automotive engineer, performance specialist, owner of Lewis Performance Garage. The prosecutor stood, a tall woman with short-cropped hair and a courtroom rhythm that was both methodical and merciless. Miss Lewis, can you describe what happened on the afternoon of March 7th at the Beverly Crest Auto Gallery? Kendra nodded once. I was there to pick up a part I had ordered. While I waited, I overheard a discussion regarding a Lamborghini Huracan that had been non-functional for 2 weeks. I observed the vehicle, identified the fault, and corrected the issue after being publicly challenged by Mr. Renshaw. She paused. The fault, as it turned out, was not technical incompetence. It was deliberate tampering. Gasps stirred at the back of the courtroom. Some reporters scribbled faster. Others looked up, already writing headlines in their minds. And how did you determine that the vehicle had been tampered with? The prosecutor asked. I ran a full diagnostic using Lamborghini-certified equipment. I discovered an unauthorized aftermarket performance chip installed on the ECU. The software bore traceable serial numbers connected to a company called Apex Dynamics. The prosecutor raised a document. Is this the technical report you submitted, co-signed by Paul Frazier of Lamborghini North America? Yes. Was the chip counterfeit? Yes. It mimicked the performance signature of high-end components but lacked core safety calibrations. It risked catastrophic engine failure. And who, according to serial logs, purchased and installed the chip? Kendra's eyes shifted toward Blake for the first time since the trial began. Mr. Renshaw. Blake flinched, his lawyer scribbling furiously. The judge leaned forward. Order, please. The prosecutor stepped closer. Miss Lewis, did you discover any indication that Mr. Renshaw sold these parts to others? Yes. My diagnostic software retrieved batch logs from the counterfeit module. Each chip had a unique identifier. Cross-referenced data from the manufacturer revealed over 15 vehicles had been fitted with similar devices, all tied to distribution from Apex Dynamics. Is Mr. Renshaw affiliated with Apex? She nodded again. He is the majority shareholder. The words echoed, not loud, but final. The prosecutor turned to the judge. No further questions. The defense attorney rose quickly. Miss Lewis, you claim this was sabotage, that Mr. Renshaw created a scenario to publicly embarrass you. But is it not possible that this was simply a misunderstanding? A flawed chip? Poor installation? Kendra met him with stillness. Poor installation does not embed serial numbers that trace back to the installer's own company. A beat. Poor installation does not invite an audience, make a wager, and record the humiliation. She leaned forward slightly. Her voice dropped just enough to carry the weight of something deeper. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a design. The courtroom stilled. The judge looked down at his notes. You may step down, Miss Lewis. As she returned to her seat, Paul gave her a nod from the gallery. Behind him, two executives from Axiom Motors whispered among themselves. One of them pointed toward her file. The other was already drafting an offer. But Kendra did not notice. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her jaw was still. Because it was never about punishment. It was about recognition. Outside the courthouse, a crowd waited. Journalists, mechanics, students, young women with notebooks, and a few older men who had once believed someone like her could not exist. Kendra emerged without fanfare. No speeches, no smiles, just a quiet presence walking through a world that had finally been forced to listen. Inside the courtroom, the judge called for recess, and Blake Renshaw's lawyer whispered, "You should consider settling." Blake did not respond. He just stared at the empty witness chair, where, for the first time in his life, someone had spoken without fear and been heard. 6 weeks later, the verdict came down. Guilty on all counts: fraud, consumer endangerment, unlawful sale of counterfeit automotive parts, and intentional defamation for financial gain. The courtroom had gone quiet when the judge spoke the words. Not because they were shocking, but because they had arrived with the finality of a closing door. Blake Renshaw sat motionless at the defense table, his suit suddenly too big for the frame it once adorned so confidently. The color had drained from his face days earlier, but this was different. This was collapse. Quiet, private, irreversible. He would not serve prison time. The plea deal had spared him that. But his company was gone. His assets were frozen. The civil suits were piling up like wreckage behind a car fire, and the settlement check he signed that morning bore a name that would haunt him: Kendra A. Lewis. She did not attend the sentencing. Instead, she spent the day back at her garage, replacing brake calipers, returning supplier calls, reworking the HVAC unit that had been moaning since spring. The shop was quieter now, not because business had slowed, but because people entered with respect instead of skepticism. No more second guesses, no more condescension wrapped in casual jokes. A small plaque had been installed beside the service desk by one of her clients. It read, "Excellence has no disguise." Kendra had not asked for it, but she left it up. Paul arrived just after lunch, holding 2 paper cups of coffee and a folder under one arm. "Mail," he said, handing her the folder. "Top one's worth reading." She peeled it open. Axiom Motors, letterhead, gold embossed. "Miss Lewis, it is with great pleasure that we formally offer you the position of Director of Performance Engineering at Axiom Motors. Your work has set a national standard, and we believe your leadership can shape the next generation of innovation in this field." She folded the letter and set it aside. Paul studied her. "You're not going to say anything?" "I am thinking," she replied. "You've been thinking for weeks." "I like thinking." He chuckled and sipped his coffee. "You know, most people would have cashed the settlement and vanished to Italy or something. Renshaw handed you 6 zeros. You could be designing prototypes in a tower in Milan." Kendra wiped grease from her hands and looked out the window. Across the street, a group of high school girls stood near a parked food truck, pointing at the garage. One of them was wearing a navy jumpsuit. Her sleeves were too long. Her eyes were wide. "They can build towers without me," she said. "But that girl out there, she needs to see that someone like her belongs here, in boots, with a wrench, covered in truth." Paul nodded slowly. "So you're staying?" "I am not staying," she corrected. "I am building." That night, her story aired on national television. Not the scandal, the resolution, the rise. The anchor's voice carried a tone of reverence usually reserved for astronauts and civil rights legends. What began as a cruel stunt ended in a reckoning, not only for one man, but for an entire industry. Kendra Lewis, once underestimated, now leads a wave of reform across auto performance engineering. Her silence became the testimony. Her calm became the revolution. At the same time, in a nondescript government office, an investigator from the Department of Consumer Protection filed a final report. It outlined systemic issues in counterfeit performance parts, with recommendations for tighter federal regulation. At the top of the reference list was Kendra's full report, complete with photos, logs, and forensic diagnostics. Meanwhile, across the internet, young mechanics began tagging their work with a simple hashtag #WrenchLikeKendra. Some used it to showcase their rebuilds, others used it to call out shady parts suppliers, but all of them used it as a badge of quiet defiance. Back at the shop, Kendra was closing up when the phone rang. It was the last person she expected. "Blake," she said, answering. Silence. Then, "I just wanted to say, I was wrong." She said nothing. "I wanted to hurt you," he admitted. "I thought if I embarrassed you, it would make me bigger. But all I did was show everyone how small I really am." Still, she said nothing. "I lost everything," he said, his voice raw now. "But you didn't take it from me. I gave it away." She exhaled. Soft. Not pity. Not relief. Just release. "Thank you for calling," she said. Then she hung up. Outside, the streetlights buzzed on, one by one. The sky was bruised with twilight. The shop smelled like rubber and fuel and something newer, like beginning again. She closed the garage door, flipped the sign to closed, and stepped out into the evening. The world was quieter now, but it was finally listening. 6 months passed. The air in Southern California had shifted, warmer, heavier, thick with the scent of coming summer and change. But inside Lewis Performance Engineering, the rhythm was steady. Clean, purposeful. The garage had doubled in size. Where there had once been 2 lifts, now there were 5. A custom fabrication room had been built in the back, where welders sparked like fireflies and blueprints lined the walls. Kendra Lewis stood in the center of it all, clipboard in hand, listening as a new hire, a young woman barely 20, explained her solution for rerouting thermal bleed in a turbocharger assembly. Kendra nodded once, then smiled. "Good. Now test it cold. Metal behaves different before it breathes." The young woman grinned and ran off, her ponytail bouncing behind her. Across the shop floor, Paul was arguing with a supplier on speakerphone while comparing 2 different shipment manifests. He gave Kendra a quick thumbs up. She nodded back. It was working. Every piece. Not because of money, though there was money now. Not because of fame, though there were still emails she had not answered, interviews she had declined. It was working because the lie that tried to bury her had become the foundation beneath something far stronger. She passed by a wall that had become a kind of shrine, not to her, but to every woman and underrepresented tech who had written letters, sent photos, or simply left notes. "You made space," one read. "Now we know we're not alone." Kendra never took those down. Each one was a reminder that silence could carry weight, Not just the weight of pain, but of potential, of patience. Of a power most people never saw coming until it stood right in front of them, calm and unshakable. She opened her office door. A man in a blue suit stood waiting. Not just any man. Gina Alvarez's deputy, from Axiom. He rose immediately. "Miss Lewis, thank you for agreeing to meet." She offered her hand. "We spoke 6 months ago. You offered me a tower in Detroit." He smiled sheepishly. "You said you were still thinking." "I was," she replied, motioning for him to sit. "And I have." She dropped a folder onto the desk between them. Inside, designs, schematics, projected test data, and one fully patented system. K-Lock, a tamper-proof performance interface for aftermarket diagnostics. "This is what I've built," she said, "and I am going to license it." He blinked. "License?" "To manufacturers, to garages, to regulators, open-source backend, proprietary integrity protocols. You can scale it, you can fund it, but I lead it." He leaned back slowly. "So you are not taking a job?" "No," she said. "I am creating one." A pause. Then, "You'll be hearing from legal." She shook his hand. "I hope so." After he left, Kendra sat for a long while in the quiet. She looked out the window as sunlight filtered through the blinds, slicing across her desk like a blueprint. She thought of her grandfather, how he would have smiled, nodding with that soft, quiet pride. He never raised his voice, never demanded to be seen, but the engines always listened. And now, the world finally had too. At 5:00 p.m., she walked the shop floor one last time, checking each bay. The Charger was done. The Mustang rebuild was coming along. One of the interns was welding a custom manifold with the kind of focus Kendra remembered having at 19. When she turned to leave, she saw the same girl from earlier, now under the hood of a WRX, hands black with grease, a light clipped to her head, brow furrowed in concentration. Kendra watched her for a beat. Then she called out, "Make sure you torque that mount evenly. It warps under heat." The girl looked up and smiled. "Got it, Ms. Lewis." No doubt, no hesitation, just respect. Kendra smiled back, grabbed her jacket, and stepped out into the fading sun. The street was quiet, the sidewalk clean. The breeze carried with it the smell of cut metal and new beginnings. She looked up at the sign above the garage door. It was simple. Lewis. Performance. Truth. No slogans, no flashy colors, just her name. And beneath it, a world that now knew exactly what it meant.